Hello everyone, Phreak here. Welcome to my patch 8.22 rundown. This is the last patch before preseason. Preseason is spicy. That's going to be exciting when that one happens, but that's of course in 2 weeks time or so. So instead let's talk about 8.22, which is not tiny, but definitely not very big. This is probably going to be a somewhat shorter video. So let's get into it. Up first, we have Akali getting some nerfs. Though Akali's not winning a ton of games specifically, she's certainly very, very frustrating. Understandably so. Really high ban rate. About 2/3 of all games, someone at least bans her. And overall, 3 changes, so she doesn't last hit things that get down to 4 HP when she hits them last. So that was going to be a power nerf in the first place. And I like the idea of this just existing for new champions in general. I don't know if this was an accident, if it came in, if this normally gets removed and no one talks about it. I'm not really sure. But either way, the rubric's been out for a while. Totally fair to remove it. Probably overstayed its welcome. I don't know the exact reasoning why this is here. I didn't get any context, but hey, totally worth doing. But yeah, the relearning curve being pretty far back in the rearview mirror makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, so the big thing here I think is the 4-second early game nerf to Twilight Shroud. Now W is typically an ability that Akali maxes second, which you can see here in my data table on the left hand side, which by the way is just being hosted on my computer because Imager was down when I went to go record this, so you get slightly lower quality, slightly smaller images because constraints. Either way, a 4-second increase in the cooldown is slightly misleading on paper because Akali's Shroud only starts cooling down when the Shroud disappears. The Shroud's duration goes up with rank, and she can extend the duration by going in and out of the Shroud. And so I assumed a max duration Shroud at any given time. Okay, so the first things first, on the left-hand side is the basic cooldown, how long she is without Twilight Shroud once it disappears. These are the numbers on the page, and the numbers here on the left-hand side. Okay, that's no surprise to anyone. Okay, and the cooldown is indeed 24% longer because that is roughly what 1/4 of 17 adds about 4. Okay, cool. So that's what she gets there. The thing on this right-hand side, though, is her overall uptime. Assuming she used a long-duration Shroud and ducked in and out of it for, 10 seconds or however long you get, and then it goes on cooldown, what percentage of the time does she have this Shroud available and can be inside it invisible, and what percentage of the time is she without the Shroud? And it went from, hey, she can be invisible for 1/3 of the entire game, scaling down to about half the entire game. She's invisible for 1/4 of the game, scaling down to about half, which is actually, I think, quite substantial at that point. You've got a really significant sort of hit in her actual sort of like how much she's actually invisible and whatnot. Also worth noting that this almost brings the cooldown down to once per wave. When it was 17 plus like 9 seconds, you had kind of some leeway here. But when it's 21 plus 9 seconds, you really just get it once per wave. So anyway, long story short, I think this is a pretty big hit in her uptime, and I just kind of spent a lot of time doing math for funsies. I didn't bother doing a bunch of math for -15 plus 15 damage. I don't think it's that big of a deal, so I didn't bother. But I would say, in general, I would expect this to be a nerf. Because 15 base damage early game means more than 15 base damage late game. In fact, there's going to be plenty of Akali games where she does not even hit level 16, thus it is only ever a nerf. And overall, these 3 things are all nerfs to Akali. I would not be surprised if her day 1 win rate is like 46%, maybe even as low as 45. These nerfs aren't huge, but there's just like enough of them that I feel like it's a pretty big hit. We'll see what happens. I think you will see Akali's fail enough that her ban rate will start to go down. In fact, we're not going to get this on camera, but I'm going to kind of quickly look at so her historic win rate hasn't gone anywhere for the last 4 patches. Her pick rate has continued to climb quite a bit, a lot of it because of sort of pro excitement, and her actual ban rate had been going down up until 2 patches ago and started climbing back up. So that's kind of interesting. Either way, yeah, certainly deserving of nerfs. She's kind of maintained a 50% plus ban rate for 4 straight patches. I think this is reasonable. Next up is Fiora. Now, Fiora is in a very slightly weak state. The buffs she got in the previous patch weren't, or the ones for the Worlds patch, I should say, didn't end up being all that large. So slightly a bit more going on with her. Essentially, Lunge now does slightly bigger prioritization It now prioritizes an R-affected target, even without a vital to proc, because if you've R'd someone, you probably want to hit them and kill them off. So this is going to be almost nothing. I'm a little bit surprised it's even got its own patch note. It's less than 0.5% of a win rate change, I'm pretty sure. Not that big of a deal, but hey, cool. That's a nice thing. It's always good to see script cleanup. I think it's kind of a nice thing overall. Next up is Jin, who is getting what ultimately end up being buffs, I'm pretty sure. When the attack fires rather than when it hits, should theoretically help him with like attack speed scaling and stuff. Essentially, it's fixes around how Hail of Blades works. Because if it only triggered when the attack lands on his third Hail of Blades attack, Hail of Blades would have already timed out, and so whoops, you didn't get your attack speed for stuff. So you can kind of read through all these. Basically, it's a bunch of script cleanup. I don't expect this to be all that win rate positive. To be fair, I've kind of lost touch with how good Jin is and which with runes. So that's something I'm not really like up to date on at this point in time. But again, this is, I think, generally fairly small. From what I've seen, Jin, despite all the funkiness with Hail of Blades being weird for him, he's still pretty successful. He still wins quite a bit. Looking at public data for win rates, Hail of Blades is still decent, but it's no longer his best anymore because of all those sort of weird nerfs and whatnot. So suddenly Fleet Footwork is his best rune, which it didn't always used to be. So this is probably going to bump his Hail of Blades win rate quite a bit, and that's probably going to be a good thing. So that's a cool thing. That's a cool thing that he's going to kind of regain some power with a Keystone that was cool for him. But overall, Jin is very successful even without Hail of Blades and is still a fine champion. That's what I've looked up just now. All right, next up is LeBlanc, another fairly frustrating champion. Understandable. She's an assassin. Assassins are frustrating, but she's an assassin with an above 50% win rate, and that is always scary. That is just straight up always scary. So nerfs to LeBlanc are fair game. I feel like it's weird because there's like Katarina and Talon and Shaco players are the ones that seem to stand out that say, hey, my champion's not very strong, where's buffs to my character? When all three of those champions do quite well and have above 50% win rates, which I think is completely fine. LeBlanc, I would feel, is one of the more oppressive ones. Just because I feel like LeBlanc has better ways out than, say, Talon, where Talon might one-shot you, but you probably kill him back. LeBlanc one-shots you and no one can touch her anymore. I feel like LeBlanc is a champion, kind of like a Kali, who probably deserves to sit below 50 for League of Legends to be a fun game. Where you've got to be a great LeBlanc to get good gains out of it, but such is the life of slippery champions. I think that, like, to a certain degree can be acceptable. Now, I feel the same way about champions that can be really impressive as well, like Kai'Sa. Like, if Kai'Sa does everything, I also want her to sit below 50%. Like, it's not just a role thing. I know I get memed a lot for hating on assassins, but a lot of assassins are just routinely unfair. And people don't have fun when assassins are strong when they're unfair. So that's just kind of in general, right? If you're Ashe, I think Ashe can be strong because if you get on Ashe, she just dies. I think Jhin can be strong because if you get on Jhin, he just dies. But like Vayne and Kai'Sa and Ezreal, when they're strong, just you lose the game, I guess, right? Like there's differing levels of frustration, and you know, generally unfrustrating champions, aka ones that you can kill when you catch them, I think are allowed to be high win rate. Brand is a great example of this. Brand has been high win rate forever, and no one complains about him. Anyway, next up. I did math for the LeBlanc W. It's not a very big deal. It means more in the early game. I'm sure there's going to be points where the 10 damage reduction, which is all she got, by the way, 10 damage reduction on W, where this 10 damage reduction is going to mean a lot for like her wave clear. There's going to be a breakpoint where she can no longer one-shot cast her minions. I don't know what that breakpoint is. I do not play LeBlanc, nor much mid lane in general, but this is going to matter. It's going to be a win rate hit to the tune of almost 1%, I'm going to say. That's usually what about 10 damage does for your primary ability. So, hey, that's something. Next up is buffs to Maokai, which is kind of an interesting change. I feel like when your scaling, by the way, is 7 to 8% and you're getting a 0.25% per rank, just flatten it. Like, just make it 8% and, like, stretch the other base damage value. Like, why bother? At this point, why bother? Like, really? Not that it really matters. It's just really weird to gain essentially nothing on this part of the rank up. Now, keep in mind, there is a 25 base damage rank up per rank. So you get 25 damage and 0.25% damage, which is equivalent if you're at 1,000 health or 10,000 health. If you're at 100, 0.25% is 0.25. So if you're at 1,000, it's 2.5 damage. Yeah, so the rank up for Maokai Sapling gets 1,000 health, goes up 25 plus 2.5. Sure glad this scales. Like, even against the most tanky of all targets, like 4,000 health, like a late game Scion, this is 40 damage higher. Like, why does this scale? Like, why? It's 40 damage against Scion. Why? Doesn't matter. I'm just like very like neurotic about numbers for no good reason, but like this is ludicrously stupid. Is essentially what it comes down to. Whatever, we're gonna move on. Okay, 1 second off the cooldown. Cool. This scaling difference means almost nothing. Here's the numbers here. Because you're getting a full like 1% max health damage in the early game, this is, you know, at least a little bit decent. Like I said, the base value of Maokai E is 25 plus 25 per rank, so 25, 50, 75, 125, etc. You know what I'm saying? I missed a number in there, but 25 per rank. And now the like half of the damage scaling is given to you up front. From the percent health perspective, I chose Maokai as the example target. Maokai is like close to 600 HP at level 1 and goes up to like 2,000 something at 18. He's like a pretty reasonable tank target. Overall sapling damage doubles if you threw it from a brush, so okay, it can do 130 damage at level 1. Yeah, this definitely does buff the damage output somewhat. I'm assuming this does more to help jungle Maokai than lane Maokai because blue buff has more max health than Maokai does. I don't know, though, to be fair, if it was already subject to the damage cap. I didn't look that closely into how much damage cap saplings had, and thus to know whether or not Maokai got screwed and actually gained nothing against jungle camps. Sorry, I didn't do that math. I didn't look that up. I apologize. Maokai overall is a reasonably powerful champion. He's sitting very close to 50% win rate across basically all roles. So I say basically all roles. I can actually look it up and look at the breakdown by role. Above average support, above average top laner, slightly weak jungler. So if Malphite ends up, or sorry, I keep saying Malphite. If Maokai ends up not gaining any jungle damage because he was subjected to damage cap, that's too bad. But a 1 second cooldown buff on E will definitely help jungle. And overall, I spent way too long on a essentially nothing buff. But he's overall a fine top laner and actually a fine support. This is going to give him some love in the jungle. Overall, whatever, he's generally fine. Noonan Willump, I didn't end up doing any actual math on. 4 attack damage doesn't tend to mean all that much. It will buff his jungle clear or their jungle clear for Noonan Willump. That will be nice. Consume just heals. I think it's 60% more against champions, which is kind of cool. 60% more against... so cool. Healing goes up. The otherwise heal is exactly the same, so nothing else really goes up. But basically, in combat, Noonan Willump slightly heal more, which is good because I feel like consuming champions was like the big win of the rework, was that you got to press Q in team fights because of course you should be able to. It was a long time coming, obviously. Excuse me. So more healing is nice. Better jungle clear is nice. I don't know what percentage of Noonan Willump's damage in jungle clear is from auto attacks, but considering Blood Boil exists, probably a decent amount. Either way, that's cool. Slight buff to all those things. As far as overall sort of progression is concerned, Nunu has been fairly weak. As builds have settled in, jungle Nunu is actually really, really close to being fair and reasonable. And in fact, if you are willing to actually buy Green Smite, not Green Smite, actually willing to buy Cinderhulk, you're basically a fair and balanced champion. So Nunu doesn't seem to really need much. Now, Nunu might be a champion that deserves to live above 50%. And the idea, again, behind that is some champions just are allowed to live high win rate because they're just never oppressive. And it's also the natural result of some champions, I think, need to live below 50% because they are oppressive. And this is mostly assassins. I think if every assassin could magically always have exactly a 49% win rate, I think that would be a good thing for League of Legends. Just like if you had to categorically like peg a win rate for a role, that's where I put assassins. Now I put marksman at 50, just because there's one in each roll. Like, don't get me wrong. I would probably put non-escape marksman at 51 and escape marksman at 49. Like, I would do the same thing there. But just like, that is how I feel about this. Katarina mains might be sad because they're going to lose like 4% win rate if that happens. But I saw a comment on these patch notes where some Katarina player was like, where's my buffs? And I'm like, you're at 52. What are you talking about? Anyway, we're getting off topic. Nice buffs on Nunu, though. Is going to sit probably 51 or so. Cool for them. Go Nunu. Now, here's the big one, and LS might have referenced or referred you here. Pyke got gigantic mathy updates. And I love mathy updates. They're really fun. Okay, so change number 1. Your maximum gray health that you can store and then heal from through your passive. The maximum gray health that I believe you can store went from 1/4 of your max HP plus 21% of your max HP per 100 attack damage, capped at 50, which is about 131 or 113, I think, attack damage. At 113 AD, bonus AD, which is only like an item or two, don't get me wrong, you would cap out gray health, and that would cap out at half your max HP. Now it is capped at 80 health, flat, plus 8 health per attack damage, which is a really, generous ratio, but it is always capped at 6% max HP, right? So on the extreme ends, the cap is 60% instead of 50%, but you have to work to get there, is the rundown, right? The cap is higher, but you have to work to get there. So here's the math, and it's a lot of it. Okay, so we're going to see if we can scale. Yes, we can. Okay, so here is, if you buy no damage ever, if you play Frozen Heart Stone Plate full tank Pyke, you get no gray health. It stays at 80 and your life is pain. Now, granted, you literally cannot pick a rune page that does not give you attack damage. No, I take that back. You can go Precision Inspiration. But why would you do that? So here's this, right? If you have literally 0 attack damage and you go Precision Inspiration every game, for who knows why, this is how much less health you're getting. At level 1, when you're coming into lane, it's not that much worse. It's worse, don't get me wrong, but it's not that much worse. But at 0 AD, here's what that is. Okay, then we say, okay, what about at 50 attack damage? And 50 attack damage, by the way, is like Caulfield's Warhammer plus Serrated Dirk, or like one of those items plus a longsword plus runes. It's like reasonably easy to get to, like not cheap, don't get me wrong. It's going to take some time to get there, but it's not obnoxiously hard to get to 50 attack damage. So if you get to 50 attack damage, here is where you get to receive yourself, right? You have substantially more health for most of the game, right? Up until through level 11, you have more gray health stored with simply 50 bonus attack damage. And again, that's not asking very much. It's just requiring you to actually have some. Okay, that's not too hard to get to. Cool. How does it go from here? And he said, okay, well, how about 120 attack damage? 120 attack damage is... Like I mentioned before, right past the old max, plus I think it was 113 or something, or 117. I forget. I had the exact number written down somewhere else. It's not at my fingertips. Was the old max. The new max is actually like 160 something to make it all the way up to the same numbers. But if you are at 120 bonus attack damage, and obviously you can't do it super early into the game, but level 11 onwards, if you're up here, you've got 20% more, right? You can. If you are capping out your required resources, your gray health is 20% more than before. That is what you're ultimately receiving via a buff to attack damage Pyke. Is attack damage Pyke has 20% more gray health than before. Just like full stop. That is what you get, is 20% more gray health than before. But unless you buy attack damage, it is a nerf, which means this very directly nerfs tank Pyke, buffs AD Pyke. And as far as Pyke's win rate sort of data is concerned, sussing through it's going to be a little bit too hard right now, doing it live on the spot, but definitely tank Pyke has been more powerful. Okay, next, a mana cost buff to Ghostwater Dive, the W sort of camouflage, and the movement speed, instead of ranking up per rank up, is flattened at a lower value and ranks up per lethality you pick up. And you say, okay, well, how's that math work out? And here it is, right? The old value, and it was something you maxed last, obviously, went from 60 to 80 based on rank, and now it's 40 flat, which is, of course, quite a bit slower. You are overall about 12% slower as a champion, not counting diminishing returns, so you are actually less than 12% slower, just because that's how math works, trust me. And overall, got a little bit less. So how much lethality does it take to equal? Well, at 13, you equate rank 1, which is going to last you until level 13. So finish Yomu's Ghostblade, and you already have a better W. So again, very easy to buff lethality / AD Pike. Yomu's is not that expensive. If you're willing to buy the item, you will complete it before too long, and thus you will then be faster. So tank Pike is slower, and attack damage Pike is faster. This seems like a positive thing. This seems good. When you start ranking up more, okay, 17, well, that's still less than Yomu's gives. Okay, 20, okay, well, that's less than Duskblade gives. And then we go up to 23, then 27. And 27 is Yomu's plus Serrated Dirk. Actually, I think 18 is Yomu's plus Serrated Dirk, but close enough, obviously. So this is not far off. This is not hard to get to Yomu's plus Serrated Dirk by level 18. The early game will absolutely be less. You will absolutely have less lethality and less move speed. But once you get to Serrated Dirk, you're close. That's 10. And at that point, you're like 4.5% move speed off. Like, does it really matter at that point? Probably not. And hey, it's cheaper on mana cost. So early game nerf, definite late game buff to attack damage Pike. Definite overall nerf to tank Pike. The next thing is Phantom Undertow, which is a 10 mana cost decrease. And the stun no longer scales with rank, but it gives you a 1/10 of a second per 10 lethality. So what does that math look like? Well, you max E second, so it's the same ability until level 8. But if you don't have a Serrated Dirk by level 8, it is weaker. If you don't finish Yomu's by level 10, it is weaker. If you don't have Yomu's plus Serrated Dirk at 12, it's weaker. If you don't have Duskblade of Drakthar plus Yomu's Ghostblade at level 13, it's weaker. Now, Support Pike can probably swing 7,000 gold by level 13. That seems doable. Now, this is not counting gold generation items having to be bought and boots having to be bought, so it's not 1-to-1. You know, you have a bit more money to spend than that. But this is like reasonably close. The early game is identical, don't get me wrong, and it's reasonably close. Now, you might say, wait a second, you're forgetting sudden impact. You're forgetting the all-important sudden impact rune, which says when you dash or leave stealth, you gain lethality for a while. And in fact, I was not counting that until just now. Phantom Undertow, by itself, by casting it, triggers sudden impact, thus definitely gives you lethality. Thus definitely increases its own stun duration. So in fact, the rank 1 stun at level 1 is in all cases longer. Now, not by much. I think you get like 5 or 6 lethality or something really, really low early game. I didn't jot down the numbers for sudden impact, but you're looking at like 6 to 10 lethality for a lot of the portion of the game, if I recall properly, which exists and does matter. One thing I want to point out, though, is it will almost never affect Ghostwater Dive because it gives you lethality when you leave stealth. But Ghostwater Dive is activated when you activate stealth. So you're not going to gain the move speed out of this. You are going to gain the stun duration out of this. So keep those two things separate. Also worth pointing out that sudden impact has a duration and then a cooldown, and then you can re-trigger it. So if you W into E dash, you will get your big stun, and then for the next 5 seconds you can fight with your bonus lethality. But if it takes you more than 5 seconds, you no longer have the lethality for, let's say, your ultimate. But the cooldown is going to line up where almost every E will trigger, but most Ws won't unless you E into W. And if you do, remember to E then W, so that E triggers sudden impact, you get lethality, then you can hit W for the bonus move speed. But you've got to order them properly. Wing into E will not give you W move speed because you won't trigger sudden impact. Okay. Next up, unless I'm wrong about some of the implementation and like you can be in stealth and have lethality and it just like waits and like gives it to you, but it only starts the ticker when you leave stealth. I doubt that highly, by the way, but just like if I'm wrong, I might be wrong. I just don't think I am. And then finally, there is bonus damage on death from below for the ultimate, for getting lethality. And so I charted 10 lethality, which is Serrated Dirk, 18 lethality, which is Yomu's, and 39 lethality, which is Yomu's plus Duskblade. Yes, it can go up from there. You can buy Edge of the Night. Yes, you can have the other lethality stuff trigger. I was just talking about it, sudden impact. I just chose 3 columns because that should be enough. And ultimately, the damage increase is this much. The base damage didn't change. This is just kind of for reference how much damage it used to do, 250 to 605. And yeah, I mean, you're seeing gains of close to 10% by mid to late game. It's not hard to get Serrated Dirk by 6, and it's a decent damage upgrade there. That's 15 more damage, so it's 265 instead of 250. I mean, that's not nothing. You get in the mid game with the Youmuu's actually done. You're still seeing, close to 10%, 5 to 10% gains for most of the game. And if you really get to like 2 full lethality items, you're seeing more than 10% for most of the build. Yeah, you're not getting to Youmuu's plus Drakthar at 6. That's impossible, but by 13, totally. That's more than 10%. So like it actually scales up. Like if you're on pace, the scaling is essentially outpacing the per level growth. So you're actually getting more lethal the more you're buying. So ultimately, these buffs all seem to be really, really substantial for lethality Pike. If you're playing attack damage lethality Pike, these should all be win rate buffs. And to my knowledge, lethality Pike is statistically weak and is deserving of buffs. The only thing tank Pike loses is W move speed, E stun duration, and passive gray health. So a lot. These are not like lost to substantial huge degrees, especially because like if your tank build has like a dead man's plate, that 400 health is going to become a decent amount of attack damage, like 30 or so. So yeah, about 30 I think is actually the conversion there. It's pretty close to that. So like that gets you part way, right? Keep in mind that we're showing 50 attack damage is a buff for most of the part of the game. So upgrading your Sight Stone to like Eye of the Oasis and buying a Dead Man's Plate like gets you to the same passive basically, but it's the rest of the buffs are for Youmuu's and Duskblade. So this looks pretty good to me. I like these changes. These look really cool. I'm not much of a Pike player myself. I haven't quite gotten into playing him. I think it's super cool. It's someone that I'm excited to learn. I just haven't had the time to learn him. But yeah, I think these are cool changes. Next up is what I am pretty sure is a very large, potentially overbuff to Trundle. Now, Trundle is not in a great spot, don't get me wrong. I'm looking up win rate data right now, and he is like 46 to 47% across all his roles, top, jungle, and support. Support's actually his winningest role, but whatever. But he's getting really, really substantial buffs. He's getting 5 base damage per rank up, and a flat 0.1 total attack damage ratio on the Q. So the value we're playing with on live, at least on the time I'm recording this video, though the patch is basically live in Europe at this like moment in time in the real world for me, this is what 8.21 was right here, and this is the new version right here. But I want to point out that the 8.16 changes, which is like back before Worlds, and in fact they were the postseason patch for I think just LMS. I'm trying to remember. No, I think 8.16 had NA, EU, and LPL on it. LCK was still on 8.15. Anyway, Trundle had some nerfs coming into Worlds, and it really lowered his damage output. You can kind of compare these two numbers here. It eventually went down by about 16, and that was a pretty big deal. He got some pillar nerfs later on. Other things happened, etc., etc. But anyway, that existed. But here is now what Trundle has in 8.22 compared to his old 8.16. So old super powerful Trundle compared to now modern day Trundle is what this chart is going to cover right now. And it is a pretty substantial damage bump in a large portion of the game. And eventually the big attack damage ratio kind of takes over. So it's a really big bump at level 1 because there's an attack damage ratio at level 1, pretty decent amount of base damage at level 1 as well. There used to be way stronger scaling on the rank up incentive. The rank up incentive used to be really, really good on Trundle Q, just in terms of like a base damage. So like the level 9 power is not quite as high as not as upgraded as you might consider. But overall, what it comes down to, Trundle Q does a crap ton more damage, like a lot more damage. Like this only shows like 6 to 8% down to 3% in like the troughs, but keep in mind there was also a 25% attack damage ratio increase. Well, okay, more like 12% attack damage ratio increase because you're still getting like the base 1.0 because you're auto attacking in the first place. But yeah, the more attack damage you build, the closer this gets to like 12% more damage. This is really, really substantial. Now he has still suffered the big nerfs to Pillar. I forget exactly what they were, but it was like cooldown and slow and stuff. It was definitely meaningful, don't get me wrong. But Trundle is now a much heavier fighter, does a lot more damage, and is going to kill things a lot more quickly. I am pretty sure Chomp works on turrets to deal damage. It certainly works on champions, of course. And overall, Yeah, this is a lot of power. And to be fair, I think he needs it. He's in a weak spot, 47-ish% is not great. This is going to give him, I want to say, like 2 to 3% more win rate. Like, I think this is actually a lot of damage on his primary ability. So he'll get up to like close to 49. Maybe 50 in the right role. I'm not sure that's quite true, but that's possible in the jungle where damage is all you really ever care about. But I think it's going to be a very big buff to Trundle, and he'll be very close to like generically viable. And I'm also kind of glad that Trundle is being reshaped toward damage from CC, because that should help equal out the pro versus solo queue win rate difference. So I think like even just directionally, like health for the game wise, this is a good thing. I think there is going to be an increasing trend of designers figuring out when a champion is big in pro and not good in solo queue, tweaking crowd control and wave clear down and generic champion damage up. For example, there's like PvE notes on Galio right now that is wave clear down champion damage up. The Talia changes from roughly around mid-season was wave clear down champion damage up, and went from this character being complete crap in solo queue and overpowered in pro to being sort of like this, where she's pretty good to slightly strong in both places and can just kind of go down a notch. So I think the design team's going to do really good work over the next year of sort of bridging this gap across a lot of champions, because I think they have like a new sort of direction for how to reach that, and I think it's going to be successful. Essentially CC down, damage up, and keep in mind, like, damage is always satisfying. Doing damage on Trundle, doing damage on, you name it, is always fun. Like, even if you're like one of the supportiest supports like Leona, where you can't even trigger your own passive, she provides a lot of damage and is satisfying. A lot of crowd control too, but like provides a lot of satisfying damage. All right, we're going to move on from the Trundle point because I think we covered it well enough and all related minutia. Next up is Victor, losing 0 to 20 damage off the Q, which is the discharge damage. So you throw your little thing out and then you zap him with your wand, and that's going to do 20 less damage. However, the ability power ratio is up by 0.05. So here is this math. Now, I always include, when it includes a auto attack, I include the auto attack in the ability because I think that makes sense. Victor scales up to, I believe, 103 base attack damage at the end of the game, and that looks to, line up based on the math that I'm seeing here, so that's a good thing. And overall, we have this little column saying how much ability power does it take to buff the ability. And eventually it takes 400 ability power. Now, I want to point out that his Hex Core Augment eventually grants, the perfect Hex Core grants 10 ability power per level. So 180 ability power at max level is accounted for eventually. But most games don't end at 18, and most of the work of playing the game is done before that as well. So you're looking at like 8, like sort of 5 through 11 for a lot of the heavy lifting of this game, and you're not going to get 2 to 400 ability power at levels 5 through 11. That's just not going to happen. You're going to get maybe your Hex Core done, and you're going to get pieces of Rylays. So this will definitively be a damage down for a while, unless you leave Q at one point. If you play Emax Victor, and you're not ranking up Q very fast, well, turns out you're going to be just fine. Now, also keep in mind that mid Victor and ostensibly Emax Victor is not quite as powerful. Like, top lane Victor has a really, really high win rate, and mid lane Victor has a much lower one. I'm looking at sort of public data right now, and Qmax, even in mid lane, is a 3% higher win rate on the champion. So maxing E is ever so slightly a trap, I suppose. Qmax is just simply always better for the trade, and it seems that the wave clear is not nearly as important. Certainly, I think Q got a lot of level incentives over time, got a lot of buffs over time, and now people are realizing that, oh, okay, Victor's actually more of a duelist champion, less of a wave clear mage, and they're now playing around this play style. So one thing I want to point out, if you're a mid lane Victor player and you feel like you're not doing as well as you should, play Qmax and duel people. And even with this nerf, by the way, I am very confident that Qmax will be and remain the optimal build in all roles. There are going to be situations where Emax will be better. Don't get me wrong, there will be situations. But generally speaking, just max Q in all the roles, it will be correct, and Victor will remain very, very powerful. This will be a small nerf to Qmax Victor. He will be slightly weaker. He will still be very, very strong. He will remain, I would say, quite frustrating. This will not sort of stop this problem, essentially. Um, or this will certainly not remove him from being powerful. Not to necessarily call it a problem. What might be a problem is the tank build being too good, because he does get a lot of ability power from his passive, from his hex core, and just Q and then Sheen triggers with Iceborne Gauntlet, and buying a Zhonya's Hourglass and that being reasonably easy to buy. Like Tank Victor may well be too good, and this is why the nerfs are base damage down, ability power ratio up. Next up is a change to the R, where it does 20, 40, or 60 less damage, but has a 0.15, higher ability power ratio, and these numbers are oddly similar. We are still seeing about a 15% damage cut in the base value of the ability, and it requires about 100 to 200 to 400 ability power to keep up. 400 AP at level 18, I've seen this before. But again, this requires you as Victor to gain a 200 ability power worth of other items, assuming you're getting about 20 from runes, which is roughly fair, not counting things like Gathering Storm and Celerity and whatnot, which of course you may well bring, don't get me wrong. But you've still got to buy 200 AP from sources, which is Ryleigh's and Leandri's and something else, or a death cap and something small. Like, you have to actually purchase something to make up for this. Otherwise, if you are playing Tank Victor, you are objectively weaker. And if you're playing AP Victor, at least by end game, you will definitely hit 400 AP. Like, that is not hard to do on Victor. You'll be down for a while. I feel like most level 6 basically every level 6 Victor does not have 133 AP. That is not happening. It is definitely an early game nerf. And to be fair, again, as long as people realize they should be maxing Q, Victor is objectively too strong. I think Victor overall as a champion can just be nerfed, and people have to learn that Q max is the play pattern. But then, yeah, letting him scale up into late game with high ability power seems cool. That seems like a nice thing. So that's good. I like that. I'm happy about this. A big nerf to Corrupting Potion with Time Warp Tonic. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Instead of granting 20% more healing overall, you just get half it up front, which is cool. Like, it's exciting. It also helps teach players to eat consumables in combat. Like, it's a good thing. It can also create really fun bait moments, because you're going to get 75 health back from a healing potion, which is actually a lot. It's still going to be, I think, a very, very powerful rune, because front-loaded healing is really, really valuable. It also creates this sort of weird extra incentive with biscuits, because biscuits heal percent missing health and mana. As it heals you, you are missing less, and thus it restores less, if that makes sense. But now when you chug it, bam, you get a burst of health back, and you get to feel excited about this. And I can totally see, I actually don't know off the top of my head, although I'm pretty confident that they are not on the same tier, because you can consume a biscuit and have Time Warp Tonic. I've just forgotten like what the inspiration layout is, because I use that tree so rarely. Pretty much every AD carry just always goes Precision Sorcery, so I just haven't been looking at it. And when I play Aram, everyone goes Domination Secondary for Eyeball Collector and X Hunter. So I haven't looked at this tree in a while. But yeah, you get really sick baiting, where you can get like probably a solid like 150 health back by hitting Biscuit Potion under turret, and that's Summoner Heal right there. Now maybe this creates the whole problem of like, oh no, everyone has stopwatch and I can't dive anyone ever anymore. But I don't know. I think generally this is cool. I'm going to expect that it's cool. I think it's overall still a good change. Not getting 5% move speed anymore from elixirs can be a big change in late game, but still does give you move speed when you're chucking stuff in general. Overall, I think a needed nerf, but still hopefully pretty cool, pretty fun, pretty worth using. But it means that we're hopefully no longer in the everyone goes Corrupting Potion mid and top metagame. That would be nice. Some bug fixes, some skins coming up. Program Nami, Program LeBlanc. The Praetorian skins look super cool in the splash arts. Victorious Oriana coming soon. I've got the chromos. Hopefully you do too. Get gold in all the queues if you can. I believe in you. You can do it. Let's go. Some chromos for the champions coming out. The Victorious Orianas, because of course. And that is the patch. Let's do the quick TLDR. 8.22 TLDR. We have Akali with a pretty substantial uptime nerf on Twilight Shroud. This stuff is fairly minor. Fiora's stuff is fairly minor. Jin's stuff is going to make Halo of Blades not troll. He is generally quite strong. He is very good with Fleet Footwork. I'm going to hope he's okay with Halo of Blades, but he's at least strong with Fleet Footwork. LeBlanc, slightly too strong, totally deserving of some nerfs here. Maokai change means almost nothing. Doesn't really need that much love, so whatever. Nunu and Willump are generically, I would say, fine in the jungle. Certainly, tank Nunu is better than AP Nunu, somewhat by design, somewhat known, but slightly more powerful. I guess it's okay. Pyke getting very substantial nerfs to tank Pyke. Here is how much less health he's going to restore if you don't build attack damage. It's a lot less, but it's very quickly much better once he starts building even a modicum of attack damage. So that's really, really powerful. As far as Ghostwater Die's movement speed, Phantom Undertow's stun, that's not too bad either. Once you buy a little bit of lethality, you are faster, 13 to 27. Once you buy a moderate amount of lethality, you stun more. This also stacks with sudden impact, so you are pretty much certainly stunning more if you're building any amount of lethality at all as Pyke. R damage up moderately if you build lethality, so buffs to damage Pyke, nerfs to tank Pyke, seems good to me. Trundle getting some really substantial damage buffs to the tune of 5 to 10% in a lot of cases. That's cool. He's going to gain, I think, a lot of win rate, but still be very slightly weak. Victor losing some fairly moderate damage off his Q and his ultimate, and requires about 400 AP by endgame to keep up. And Time Warp Tonic nerf is, I think, a good thing. Overall restores less health. That's probably a good thing. That's going to do it for the patch rundown. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time, probably for, if I have time, a random ramble on some game mechanic stuff, or at least for the preseason rundown. I'll see you later.